This is a story of reality, of its beginning and of its end. In the beginning there was nothing but the mother star, around which all that is and will be spun. Izlandia. The mother star was prescient, for she knew all the cosmos destined to occur. She saw that in the winds of space and time lay her destruction. A wave of entropy that at its peak would sweep the darkness, returning all to equilibrium. So in the greatest sacrifice of all, she wept. Knowing full well of what it would evoke, the mother star let loose a scream into the cosmos. Tears of gas and dust that poured out and through the universe, creating the solar nebula, creating matter. Atoms snaked and grew, coiled outwards into the infinite stars and galaxies. The mother star gave all her energy to this creation, knowing full well of its destined end. The paradox from which she forged life. Izlandia. But this is not that story. It is mine. When Izlandia made the universe, she gave pieces of herself to its new occupants. To the stars, she gave light, energy burning brighter than all else existing. To the black holes, silence, the gift of true emptiness. To the comets and asteroids, freedom to roam and explore the cosmos as they saw fit. And to the planets, identity. The planets became gods of space, each of us staking out our cosmic claim across the galaxy, selecting orbits in which to mold and form ourselves as chosen. Some took the form of giants, pulling elements from space with which to change their shape and color. Others chose to shrink, adorning themselves with rings of rock and dust. And I, well, in this great expanse, the mother star presented us one final choice. The chance to take our own role in the process of creation, and to host life. Few chose to, for the mother star had imbued us with her vision. She showed us that the path to balance was fraught and narrow. But sparingly, across the galaxy, a few of us chose to ignore the warnings of the mother star. With identity came ego, and our newfound egos convinced us that we could achieve the balance she declared to be so precarious. My proudest moment, and my greatest regret. My solution to the complex issue of life was a simple one. A self-containing system I could regulate with my body. Balance guided by our sun, in whose aura I had chosen to lay my claim. With my plan in mind, I set out to create the world I envisioned. I built bacteria and microorganisms to carry out my tasks at first, but they weren't enough. So I built larger creatures. First, I created the Vythrandia, beasts the size of comets covered in plates of iridescent scales. When they rose above the waves and took to the skies, the whole surface of my oceans sparkled with 1,000 lights. Their task was simple, to scoop water from my seas and send it to the skies. Boiling it in their stomachs, the Vythrandia roared towards the sun, and rainbow hues of gas and vapor shot 1,000 leagues into my skies. Patrons of the atmosphere. Next came the Bazulae. Even larger than the Vythrandia, they broke off great swaths of the seafloor, moulding them into shells the size of islands. With these upon their backs, they rose through the depths. Their task too was simple, diving mud from beneath my seas, retrieving it to build land along my sides. For millennia they served me this way, mouthful after mouthful of sand and soil, building land up from the seafloor through the depths and towards my surface. patrons of the land and seas. And finally, the Scalamantha, coiled tendrils of fire 1,000 meters long. I forged them in my core, glowing nightmares that formed in the twisting maelstrom of heat and energy from which all my inventions came. The Scalamantha were assigned the final task of my transformation and sent twisting outwards through the crust. Their movements sculpted me, building hills and mountains across my surface, driving the land created by the Bazulae into islands across my breath. Occasionally bursting through the surface with terrible screams, casting ash along my lands to fertilize them. Patrons of tectonics, of my molten core. Their tasks complete, I swept the debris from my transformation, molding it into a ball in which I gave these creatures the choice to rest. They had spent countless years assisting me, and so I gave them freedom, releasing those into the cosmos whom desired it, and for the weary, entombing them in white rock. Finally, I cast this sphere into my orbit, where they could assist me in the guiding of my seas and tides, yet be at rest. With every piece put into place, I exhaled. A wave of green that swept my surface and stirred the system into motion. Perpetual balance, regulating itself in a perfect cycle. I called it nature. For eons, the system worked in perfect harmony. Species rose and fell, evolved and changed, replacing one another seamlessly. My atmosphere was rich, and my shores and oceans teemed with life. I still knew the warnings of the Mother Star, but in my passion of creation, they had been discarded to the recesses of my memory. Satisfaction with my task had left me complacent. And as the Mother Star had said it would, at last it came. Greed. She had warned us of it, that there would always be a species discontent with their reality, a plague of ego and ambition that was drawn to life, no matter its form or origin, and would throw even the most perfect system into chaos. A small tribe of primates living in my plains and jungles took it upon themselves to take the system into their own hands. Dissatisfied with their role in my ecosystems, they sought more, expanding their own habitat across my surface, even at the expense of others. The Edax Mundi, devourers of worlds as they would eventually be known. But we'll get to that. I saw this, but now my own ego led me astray. I thought I could control the system. At that point, I still could. But the Edax learned what secrets they could take from my system, using them to twist my own world against me. They learned of energy, of power, and of its power. Like many of the great changes in my system that had come before, it started with lightning. The Edax had seen it strike my plains for centuries, howling to the moon amidst the rain and thunder. So in the shadows of the burning bay above, they hatched a plan to steal this power and make it their own. With sticks and branches they lay in wait, and when it next struck, they set upon it in swaths, raising torches to the dark night sky. With the power of fire, the Edax evolved at vicious speed. They began to breed and multiply with frantic pace, forming tribes and villages across the lands. They slashed forests and raked fields, marking their territory with a ferocity I'd never seen. And still, it wasn't enough. Quickly, the boons of fire proved insufficient too, so again they stole from nature. All creatures, Edax or other, knew of the great beasts with which I had originally sculpted the lands, for the evidence of their transformations were written harsh upon the landscape. 1,000-foot rifts, claw marks that ran through the mountains, great depressions in the land, and print marks that stretched to the horizon, all tales of those who came before. So they learned to twist the very landscape to their will, digging further into the clefts left by the Bazulae and Scalamantha, gouging them open to prise forth minerals from beneath my surface. With this newfound fuel, they took to lighting streets and cities, expanding, and all the while breathing acrid smoke into my skies. This served them for a time. They flourished, and still balance was maintained. But the Edax wanted more. And so they began to hunt for these creatures, prowling my oceans, searching through the deep and slaughtering and draining creatures of their oils. I began to understand the terrible danger that they posed, but there was nothing I could do. Used to operating changes over millennia, I had no recourse for the speed at which it happened, and they began to strip me bare. I was infuriated by my own passivity and at the irreverence and disrespect the Edax showed towards me, their protector and creator. A festering wound. I had left the problem for too long, and without recourse I knew it would destroy everything. So in a fit of fury I called upon the spirits of the ancients to assist me. My anguished cry for help awoke the beasts who long ago had helped to form me, and from their resting place the spirits of Vythrandia, Bazulae, and Scalamantha now lent their energy to my protection. The spirits of the Vythrandia took to the skies, circling me, swirling my polluted atmosphere. From within it they formed hurricanes, maelstroms that wrought havoc on the Edax cities, destroying power plants and transportation systems, the very infrastructure they had used to corrupt and exploit me. Meanwhile, the Bazulae went plunging through my seas, seismic beings that sent earthquakes and tidal waves rippling across my surface. They laid devastation along coastlines and islands that they had once helped to build, long since infested by the Edax. I took no pleasure in the destruction, but in the scope of what was being done, I felt I had no choice. By burning coal and oil, the Edax had already begun to transform my climate with a pace I couldn't stop. I knew there was no way to halt this madness, to divert them from their terrible course. But if the Edax wouldn't stop of their own accord, I would show them just how terrible this future they were building towards could truly be. With the power of the Scalamantha, I funneled heat from my core into the skies and oceans, warming them, rendering myself uninhabitable. If the Edax wouldn't let other life persist, then there was no place for any of them, for the Mother Star was right, and all must burn. I warmed the oceans, collapsing fisheries and sending toxic algae blooming across the surface. Cities starved, millions dying as food systems collapsed. The stench of rotting fish and seaweed swept inwards, pouring from the coasts across every land and sea. To my atmosphere I did the same, using the clouds of smoke and pesticide left by the Edax to trap heat and cook them on my surface. They had known this was a problem, but chosen to ignore it, prioritizing greed and profit while they fought and warred, ignoring and imprisoning all of their own who sought to help me. Deserts grew and spread across the lands. famine and disease taking the lives of millions. And all while the Edax argued, dragging each other down as they scrambled for power. Any solutions that were found, drowned by the screams of hate and tyranny. I thought that when faced with systemic collapse, at last the Edax would rally and we could work together to achieve balance. But even as their cities fell and states collapsed, the Edax continued to kill and violate each other, greed and ego rising to the surface above all else. I had done this with sadness in my heart, for many of the creatures affected had no role in this terrible cycle. But the violence and anger the Edax displayed proved to me my actions were necessary. The most powerful of the Edax Mundi had long realized the warming was tipping out of control and had begun to construct beasts of their own. Metal monsters with which to leave the smoldering surface and set out to the stars. As seas swept the lands and forests burned, they condemned their brethren, focused only on their profits, squeezing from the people every penny to put towards their own escape. By this time, it was already too late for those on the surface, and most knew it. But in their metal monsters, the remaining Edax took to the skies, in one final and desperate attempt to flee my wrath, and the ruins of their own making. I knew I could not let them free into the cosmos. I would not be responsible for their wreaking havoc on other galaxies. So with the last of all my strength, I let loose a scream, much like that of the mother star, oh so long ago. It sent waves of heat rippling around me, quenching the metal beasts of the Edax in torrents of flame as they sought to break free of my gravity. Sickened by their corruptions of nature, I no longer had the strength to destroy them, and death was far too swift for all the destruction they had caused. So I entombed them, melting their hatches and escapes as they rose into the skies. With the spirits of all those creatures rendered extinct by their actions, I cursed the Edax to infinite imprisonment, to roam the cosmos for all eternity in the ecosystem of their own creation, and reflect upon the destruction that they'd wrought. And as my cries faded to silence, I collapsed, sinking into the burning embers of my body, as the light from the engines faded into the night sky.